discuss alimony. Okay, now this is something that we've already discussed in great details when we were doing gross income. Now we're simply looking from the perspective of the person who's paying alimony rather than the person who is receiving alimony. The provisions are exactly the same, and if you look at it, this is the same slide that we had produced while discussing gross income. So now we have finished whistleblower, IRA, self-employed, health insurance, FICA taxes, which is half of self-employment FICA taxes, and retirement. We've discussed educator expenses. Now we're going to talk about the A component, which is alimony. Now these alimony agreements could be executed either before the Tax Cut and Jobs Act or after Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. We know that if it was an earlier agreement, then it is allowed as a deduction where you get it above the line as adjustment. So when I say if I've taken it as a deduction, that means this is not taxable in the hands of the giver, and it becomes taxable in the hands of the recipient spouse, right? So it becomes, it is a deduction. So you take it out of the income of the payer and you include it in the income of the recipient spouse. But if you look at what happened after the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, we said that, see, we can't touch the older agreements, but for all the agreements that are signed after the Tax Cut and Jobs Act came into force, which was after 1st of January 2019, we are no longer going to treat alimony as taxable in the hands of the recipient. So we are not allowing it as a deduction. That means the giver spouse is paying tax on the amount that is being paid as alimony, and the recipient spouse is not paying tax on the amount that is being received as alimony. Please remember, either before or after, child support and property settlements were exactly what they were earlier also. They did not change anything in child support and property settlements. We said that all of these are going to be taxable in the hands of the giver only, and nothing will be taxed in the hands of the receiver. So after the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, we've made this entire thing uniform. So if there's any divorce agreement that was signed after 31st December 2018, we are not going to tax anything in the hands of the recipient, either alimony or child support or property settlements. It will all be taxable in the hands of the giver. What is child support? Anything which is mentioned in the decree about a child, about the figure being contingent on the child attaining a particular age. So the alimony is 6,000, but it will become 5,000, or maybe if it will become 3,000 if the child reaches 18 years of age. So we know that child support is $2,000. And please remember, it has nothing to do with what is being paid and how is it getting paid. It's all about what is written in the decree. So let's say I was supposed to pay 6,000 for alimony, which includes 2,000 of child support. But you end up paying only $4,000. In this 4,000, you will first deduct 2,000 as child support, and only the balance can be treated as alimony. So it's always first child support and then to alimony. And please remember, any kind of property settlement, later on when you do section D, which is schedule D, you will again see that any kind of property settlement is never taxable in the hands of the recipient, always continue to be taxable in the hands of the payer, that means the donor. Now this is theory, but it's just important for you to go through it once. What is deemed as an alimony? Anything which is a legal requirement with after the execution of a written divorce agreement between the two parties involved. It has to be in cash or its equivalent. Payments cannot extend beyond the debt. So the person, the moment the spouse who's the recipient spouse dies, the alimony goes away with it. It cannot be made to members of the same household. It must not be anything but alimony, and the people who have separated cannot go on filing a joint return even after the divorce agreement has been signed. If all of these stipulations are met, we say that the particular item is alimony. Now let's look at the questions on alimony. Let's take the first question in the picture. What amount may Mr. Dawson deduct and his former spouse report as alimony? So we're talking about the deduction. That means it has to be a pre-2018, a pre-2019 divorce agreement. Mr. Dawson's divorce decree, which became final in 2017. So I know it is pre, so I know alimony will be allowed as a deduction, not child support, not property settlements. It requires him to pay $500 a month, of which $300 is specified as child support. So we are looking at a figure of 300 into 12, which is 3,600 as child support. At the minimum, this is what the divorce decree says. During the year, the person pays only 5,000 in totality. So ideally, the person should have paid 6,000, but the actual payment made was only 5,000. And now they're asking you how much of it is a deduction in the hands of Mr. D above the line. So what is a deduction? Deduction is only for alimony, not for child support. So what is the total payment made? See, the total payment made is $5,000, out of which if I take away child support, it is already 3,600. So now I'm only talking about a figure of 1,400 as alimony, and this is the only amount that could be allowed as a deduction in the hands of the payer spouse and as an income in the hands of the recipient spouse. So the answer becomes B for Bangalore. Now let's look at the next question. These are very good questions, guys, and this is something which you can tie it up also with your gross income lecture. So this is a very important topic, and you should be able to, because there's a lot of traps that they can put for you for these questions. Now look at this. What is Mr. Carter's 2025 alimony deduction? So they're talking about a deduction. That means it is only possible if that divorce decree was signed before 31st December 2018. Starting in 2025, Mr. Carter must make payments to his former spouse under a 2025 divorce decree. The moment I hear 2025 divorce decree, I know this is a post 31st December 2018 agreement. So I know there will be no deduction allowed for alimony. I'm not even going to read all of this because I know for sure it's a post 2018 agreement. Nothing will be allowed as alimony. So the answer becomes 0. Nothing would be allowed as alimony. Now let's look at the next question. The call of the question is, what is their adjusted gross income for 2025? They're talking about gross income less adjustments, I know, is AGI. So they're talking about what is this figure for this individual. The following items appear on Mr. and Mrs. R's 2025 joint return. Net profit on Mrs. R's Schedule C is, so I know my gross income includes 50,000. Court-ordered alimony of 6,000 paid by Mr. R under a pre-2019 divorce agreement. So I know I'm going to get this as a deduction because it is a pre-2019 divorce agreement. Self-employment tax of $7,000, of which 3,000. So I know my self-employment tax, only half of it will be allowed as a deduction, which represents the employer's portion. What is their adjusted gross income? So I will take away these two and the answer, the balance answer. So if I look at this, so I start with 50,000. I reduce 6. I reduce 3,500. It becomes 40,500, which is my AGI after taking half of my self-employment taxes and after taking my alimony deductions, because it was a pre-2019 alimony agreement. So the answer becomes $40,800. I look at the last question under this topic, which says, which of the following must be true for a payment to qualify as deductible alimony under a pre-2019 divorce or separation agreement? The payment must be in cash or kind under a written agreement and cannot continue after the death of the payer's spouse. I know for sure this is true, but I'll test the others. The payments may be made in property or services rather than cash. So it cannot be property. Okay, otherwise it will not be taken as an alimony. The spouses must file a joint return. That is wrong. The spouses must not file a joint return. And the payments must be made to members of the same household. Even this I know for sure is wrong. So I know that the correct answer would be 1, and which was A. That's about it.